Welcome, welcome everyone to a glorious evening. On behalf of the Absalom Jones Episcopal Center for Racial Healing, where Dr. Catherine Meeks is our executive director, we just hug you and say welcome, welcome. My name is Dominique Harding, and I have the privilege of serving as a program manager for the Center for Racial Healing. And tonight, I am going to be assisting you as your technician. So if you have any issues in regards to the internet or Zoom, then you can let me know. If you will look to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat box. You can utilize that, just click on it. And next to the two box, it's a very small arrow to the right of it. You'll see my name, Dominique. If there's anything you need to private message me about. This is interactive conversation after we hear our lovely speakers for this evening. And so at the appropriate time, we are, if you'd like to speak, we're going to ask people to just simply put the word me in the chat box at the appropriate time. And then we will call on you and you can unmute yourself and we will go from there. And then finally, in the event that there are any technical difficulties and we're short-circuited or kicked off, or how the internet can do sometimes, then just kindly please use the same link to sign back in and give us about 5 minutes to resume. And so without further ado, I present to you my shero and the Executive Director of the Center for Racial Healing, Dr. Catherine Meeks. You're muted. Okay. You're still muted. I can unmute you here.
Can you spotlight us when we're speaking?
Yes, you are already spotlighted.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dominique. And this is such a glorious day for me because I've been in conversation with my colleagues about this day for a pretty good while. And I'm so delighted that we're all gathered here this afternoon for this, well, actually it's evening now. The daylight savings time has really gotten the best of me. I keep thinking it's afternoon when it's actually already turned into dinner time. So thank you for coming to be with us and to engage in this conversation with us this evening. I am so delighted that the Center for Racial Healing can be a place where we can offer conversations such as this on elders and eldership and COVID and mass incarceration and all of the issues that the center engages, because we know that healing has to engage all of these pieces, and we are so honored to have the opportunity and to have the support that comes from people like yourselves who keep on supporting us and joining our programs. Thank you. We are deeply grateful. It is my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce you to you the two elders, two women, two colleagues of mine that will be engaged in our program today. And the way this is going to work is I will introduce them, and then I have a few things to say about the topic, and then each of them will speak, and then we will invite you into a conversation with us about the topic and just the things that you might have that you would like to offer. So as we are speaking, please be thinking about questions that you might have or short comments that you might want to make so that we can have an engaging conversation together. I think that conversations work so much better than somebody just talking to you. So please keep in mind that we genuinely want you to let yourself ask whatever might be coming to you, even if you think better of it. We invite you not to think better of it and to contribute to making the whole fabric that we want to create be better here tonight. So the first speaker after me will be Dr. Fanny Brewster, who's a Jungian analyst and professor of depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute. She is a writer of nonfiction, including African Americans and Jungian psychology, Leaving the Shadows, and another book titled Archetypal Grief, Slavery's Legacy of Intergenerational Child Loss and the Racial Complex, a Jungian Perspective on Culture and Race. Dr. Brewster is a lecturer and workshop presenter on Jungian-related topics that address dream work, American culture, and creativity. She's a faculty member at the New York C.G. Jung Foundation and an analyst member with the Philadelphia Association of Jungian Analysts. I have to say a personal thing here, and that is that in the 80s and 90s, when I was a graduate student, I searched all over the United States trying to find other African Americans who were interested in Jung and couldn't find anybody. When I did find Dr. Brewster, I felt like the person in the desert that has been searching for water and actually found a stream. I am so honored to have found her, and so honored to have been able to be in collaboration with her and to just start walking on the journey together. And we'll just kind of watch it and to see where it takes us. It is such an honor to welcome you, Dr. Brewster. The next speaker will be Dr. Gloria Wade Gayles, who is professor at Spelman College and earned her bachelor's degree from Lemoyne College in American Literature and a PhD in American Studies from Emory. She was awarded an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Meadville Lombard Theological School of the University of Chicago and named the Case Professor of Teaching Excellence for the state of Georgia. Her publications include numerous articles in national journals and 6 books, from Pushback to Strength, A Black Woman's Journey, No Crystal Stair, Race and Sex in Black Women's Novels, and My Soul is a Witness, African American Women's Spirituality. Her most recent publications are In Praise of Teachers and Conversations with Gwendolyn Brooks. Recently, she conducted research on a critical study of the community as savior in selected African American novels. In August 2000, she was named Eminent Scholars Chair in Independent Scholarship and Service Learning at Spelman College. In addition to being the faculty mentor for Spelman's Independent Scholars Program, she is founder of the CIS Oral History Project and Resonance, a choral performance group at Spelman College. And Gloria is like Fanny to me, a giant, a person that loves the spirit of elders and youth and has committed herself in such an amazing way to opening the lens to those young women that come into her classes. I have had the exquisite joy of being with her and being with her students. And there is nothing more gratifying than watching those young women blossom because of her eldership, because of her leadership, and because of her instruction. I am so honored to be with these 2 women today and to have this conversation with you, for all of us to be in this conversation together. I just turned 75 years old last week, so I think I'm a crone now. I believe I think I qualify. I think I'm ready to own it and live in it and be whatever it means and accept it and be gracious with it. But one of the things that has been happening, and one of the conversations that Gloria and Fanny and I have engaged, is where do I, the 75-year-old, find an elder? I need the 85-year-old, the 90-year-old, the 100-year-old because I need to stand on somebody's shoulders too. So where do I find those people, and what constitutes them being the person that qualifies them to be my elder or the shoulder that I can stand on? What does all this have to do with just trying to live your life and make it through this world? After you get to be an older person or while you are becoming an older person. There are all kinds of questions. There are all kinds of questions. And we wanted to create a space where we can ask some of those questions and maybe struggle with the answers or even answer some of them. So what we are going to do is talk a little bit about one of our ancestors who means a lot to us, and then just a little bit about ourselves in terms of this journey. And then we want to open this up, as I said before, so that all of us can engage in this conversation together. So I want to tell you about the woman who impresses me the most, and her name is Ida B. Wells, the woman who informs me, the woman who gives me courage. She is, of course, an ancestor, but she feels very present to me. As a matter of fact, I'm surrounded by her in my workplace here. I've got 3 different renditions of pictures of her, and one on my wall in my bedroom and one on my wall at my office. That's how present she is to me. If you don't know Ida B. Wells, let me just tell you quickly that she was a person who, this is something she said, which will maybe help you catch a glimpse. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth up on them. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth up on them. I think that I have been trying to turn the light of truth upon myself and upon the world that I have been asked to live in for a very long time. And the spirit that Ida B. Wells embodied has been a part of my journey for many, many years. It has become clearer to me how that spirit's been working as I've watched myself hold up the banner for remembering people who were lynched, because that was some of the work that she did the most. So I think that her presence in spirit has been such a help to me and a comfort, and helped me to have the courage to do some of the things that I've needed to do. So it's been such a delight. I wrote a book, I co-authored a book with someone on Ida B. Wells with my friend Nib Stroop, and Ida B. Wells, Passionate for Justice. And then I got to meet her great-granddaughter, her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster. And we have had just such a delightful time together. And I am so grateful for her courage and her humanity and her faith and her willingness to stand up, to live her life with faithfulness, and to the legacy that she left. But the most important thing about all that is that the legacy is built so completely upon the notion of you just keep doing what you need to do to be the best human you can be. And you give, and you are generous, and you keep your heart open. And that's what Ida B did. And that's what I find myself wanting to emulate. And she helps me to have the courage to do that. Dominique, there's somebody that needs to get into the meeting. So Ida B is here. Ida B is invited to be anywhere I happen to be. And I don't know that I have to invite her. I think she might just know that she's welcome and she'll show up, because she had a way of doing that, showing up where she needed to show up, whether folks thought she should be there or not. And that was another piece of the greatness of her having a sense about who she was and what she needed to be doing in the world. So I ask you, as we continue this conversation, to be thinking some about who are the elders for you, who are your elders, and who are the people that have helped you to get to this present moment. And I want to now, in just a second, I'm going to invite Dr. Brewster to speak. But before I do that, I should have said thank you to Dr. Gayles for joining us, even though she is battling with allergies from the, spring is coming, and you know what happens, and allergies and a cold. And but she has this fierce sense of love and graciousness toward me. So she's showing up not feeling too well. That's called somebody loving you. And I'm so grateful that she loves me enough and this whole conversation enough to come even when she has to have a few challenges. So let's all think good thoughts for Dr. Gayles, and let's all think good thoughts for ourselves as we engage in this time together. And let's go ahead now and listen to Dr. Brewster, and then we'll have Dr. Gayles, and then we'll talk together. And I'm just, what we need is some tea and crumpets, but I don't have those. So you'll have to get your own wherever you are. Dr. Brewster.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks. I want to say good evening and welcome to you. And I'm very glad that you've decided to join us this evening. I think it's a gift, really, and a blessing to be able to be with Dr. Gayles and with Dr. Meeks, and to come together with you and talk about eldership and talk about descendants, right? When we first met, the three of us, several months ago, we were talking and thinking about what would we like to do, like what would we like to say? And one of the things that Dr. Gayles said was, this is about a time of opening the lens, right? Opening the perspective on how we could be larger as elders, right? And how we could get a longer distance and a wider perspective on how we are and how we can be connected with our own eldership, like our inner elders. That's how I think of it, as well as our descendants, right? It's looking to create and to acknowledge that there are individuals coming after us. And what is it that we are going to give them? How are we going to be with them? I think about that so much more than I ever have before. I became 72 in December, so I have a few years of youth on Dr. Meeks. So 72, but I think about that, and I, in a way, there are days I just can't believe I'm actually 72. There are days I still feel like I'm 30. There are days I feel like a teenager. There are days I feel like a 5-year-old, right? And feel like I could just cry, right? For maybe no reason, because sometimes I think children do that, right? So as I've gotten older, there are these spaces that I have to fill in a conscious way, because I am older. And then there's such a freedom to being older, right? And sometimes I have a daughter, and she'll say, God, Mom, I cannot believe you said that, right? Like in public, right? But it's like there's so much more freedom now to being able to say what one thinks, what I think in public. If I think something is of use, or if it's wrong, or someone is getting hurt, or today, for example, I went out and I had my Black Lives Matter sweatshirt on, right? And right now I'm in Philadelphia, and sometimes I go into the Lowe's, and there are people there that, I don't think they especially care for me because I'm Black, right? There's this kind of weird bias thing that happens, right? And I talk about that because it's real, about me becoming an elder. And so today when I went in the supermarket and I had on my Black Lives Matter shirt, and I saw people look at me kind of weird or strange, and I think there's something about having the boldness to be who you are. It doesn't matter what age you are, right? And I find that there are people, young people, who can appreciate my boldness even at my age, even though for my daughter, she feels like, oh my God, can't believe it, right? There's a shyness because she's my daughter. But other people who are younger, her age and younger, I think appreciate that. And I think it gives them a way to think about stepping into their future and thinking about how they want to be when they get older.
Mhm.
I want to talk about my grandmother a little bit. I have a picture of Gwendolyn Brooks in my bedroom. I have different writers, authors. Audre Lorde is in this space. Um, Hurston is in the other space. So I have pictures of them all through the house, right? Because I'm a writer, and I look at the community of writers, of women, Black women who have gone ahead of me, who have become elders, and they are like my mothers. They guide me. I look at their pictures. I think about the books that they've written, and I feel honored to be an African American writer and to feel that I'm in this lineage of power, of responsibility, of honor, of integrity. Gives me so much, to feel that, like, this is my group. Like, these are the women, these are my mothers that I've bonded with. They are my elders. They are my literary elders. And I really needed them, because there are times that I have felt lost. As a creator, as a writer, there are times that I have felt, that my work was not valuable enough to be put out into the world to get published, and that what could I possibly have to say? So as I've gotten older and published, I'm not so much haunted by those thoughts. And I do think that the archetypal energy of these women support me. And that's how I envision it, that these are my elders and they support me, these women. I would also like to say that I have an immense amount of honor and love for my grandmother as an elder, right? Because my grandmother raised me almost equally as much as my biological mother, my father's mother. And so she is an elder that I love and respect. Also her husband, my grandfather. So I spent a lot of time with them in a house. In fact, my grandmother was my midwife, because in those days when I was born, oftentimes in the South, part of our tradition in the cultural group, someone in the family was bringing children into the world, because you couldn't even go to a hospital, segregated, right? So my grandmother was my midwife and brought me into the world. And so she is my godmother, my elder, my mother that I love as my own mother. So I just want to say, this is the energy and the spirit in which I come to you this evening. And I'm looking forward to us engaging in a good conversation, good solid conversation about who we are, how we think about our elders, how we want to move in this life, and how we want to move into the next life, right? Because this is a place of transition, this life. Right? Okay,
Yes.
so thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And Dr. Gayles, unmute yourself.
I'll unmute her. Okay.
She would do the muting.
Yeah.
My apologies for my my scratchy voice, but it does not speak to the good feeling I'm having about this experience. It is not the voice with which I would speak if I had that voice about the experience that I've had already. I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest woman of this trio. And I am amazed. I'm amazed when Catherine said, Catherine, you said, hold on, I have notes somewhere. You said you're 70?
75.
75, right? And then Fanny, you said what?
72.
72.
Okay, and so there's this oh my God, I'm 70. Well, if we were in slavery, at 50, we would be old. And we wouldn't reach it. We wouldn't continue living. We wouldn't reach our 70s. And how we perceive age and aging can shape the way we see ourselves and the way we value ourselves. And no, that's not the case with either of you. I am the oldest of the three of you. I am 83. I do not feel 83. I am not my age. I am instead all of the experiences that people who are my age and live to be older than I, all of those experiences help me make sense of how we perceive ourselves as older women or older men or older people. And so as the oldest in the group, I should have wisdom that these young people do not have. And let me tell you, I do not. When I think of my elders, and I do that regularly, by the way, sometimes they are three women who shape my approach to teaching and to learning, because you cannot teach without learning. The young scholars and sis are my teachers, but I think about those three women. They are my elders. They are Callie House. Callie House in the 19th century. Callie House, as a former bonded woman, was working in Tennessee. That's why she's probably my elder, because I'm from Tennessee, born and reared there. Was working in Tennessee, in Nashville, as a washerwoman. Catherine, the article that we used last semester insists on the washerwoman strike in Atlanta. Most of those women were older women. But Callie House comes to me as an ancestor because, as a former slave, she had the courage to advocate for reparations. And that's simply remarkable. We don't even think about her when we, in our arrogance, say that we are fighting for reparations. She did it in the 19th century as a former slave who was a washerwoman. She is one of my elders. She inspires me. The other elder, of course, she would be my ancestor, rather not elder, is Mary McLeod Bethune. She has to be an ancestor for me because of her commitment to education. And her quote, this quote from her writing, this quote speaks to my passion for learning with students who are my teachers. Her quote is this: "The whole world opened to me when I learned to read." She's my ancestor. She's my ancestor. And those two women speak for me or speak to me, they do both, about passions that shape my life. So those are ancestors who are not in my biological family. There are many ancestors in my biological family. They must be. My ancestors must be women whom I can trace, I can see from whom I came. And one is my grandmother, who did not have the privileges I have because she was a Black woman living in Mississippi during a time when there was no such thing as liberty or justice or freedom for Black women. And she was raped. She was raped by a sheriff, by someone who owned the land on which she worked as a sharecropper. Her courage to move beyond that experience into life that had meaning for her inspires me. She is one of my ancestors, and so too my mother, who is one of the most gifted and spiritual women I know. Before her death, she called me to her bed and she said, "Here, I want you to take these, keep these now." And I don't know whether or not you're old enough to remember the time when every bit of information that was important to us, we kept on a little notebook that was about the size of this, and sometimes it had wire on the top, right? It was wired at the top. You know what I'm talking about, Fanny? Or sometimes it was on the, are there any witnesses to this? Can anyone witness if you just raise your hand? You know what I'm talking about? I'd say, yeah. And sometimes those little books were wired on the left, on the top, on the left. And my mother never received a college degree. She would have, had she not been Black woman and born and living in Mississippi. She was a valedictorian of her high school graduating class, but beyond that, she went to college with me. She typed my papers. She read my books. She helped with homework. She was incredible. I loved her. I worshiped her. I thought she was the brightest woman and the most beautiful woman and the most courageous woman ever. But she gave me that little wire, notebook, and she said, "Here, you would need all the information you would need is in this little book." I said, "What are you doing? What do you mean? All the information you need is in this book. Here's my dad." I said, "Well, I'm not having this. I am not having this conversation. Don't get me involved in this." And no, I'm not having this conversation. No, she said, "No, you're going to have this conversation and you're going to take this book and this is what you." And then she said something that I can hear her saying now that had an impact, major impact on my life. And I'm not a church woman, but I'm a very spiritual woman. And I think because of my mother. And she said, "Everything you need to know about me is in this book. Everything you need to know," right? She said, "I want you to remember this. Wherever I am, wherever you are, I will be there with you. Because you must remember, Gloria, we are spirit, you know." She said, "We are spirit, you know." And I think about that often. Hearing that helped me through my grief because, can I give a testimony? Before she left this physical world, I could be in Boston, she'd be in Tennessee. I could be in Europe with a little grant travel experience, she'd be in Tennessee. I could be Colorado, she would be in Tennessee. After her death, there has been no place in which I have found myself. that I did not feel her. Every place in which I am, she is. And that is a guiding force. And that is one of the most powerful things that an ancestor can do. Direct you, embrace you, teach you, guide you, and be there always with you. And so there. Only one other thing I want to say. When we talk about ancestors, if we're talking about age, if we're over the lens of age, I must share this quote with you. Because the poorest, the people who suffer the most in this country are the aged poor. And as activists for social justice, we must remember that poor Black women, older Black women, are among the poorest in this nation. And I want to read this quote and then I'll stop. I suppose it might be possible for me to age gracefully, for one to age gracefully when one is not poor or alone or sick in mind and body and ignored or despised or has lived a privileged life. And so as I give thanks for my ancestors, I give thanks for women today like Catherine and like Dr. Brewster, whom I just met, and it's a joy. Women like that who are teaching me, although they are really, really quite young.
Well,
Thank you very much, and thank you. Yeah.
well, I love to be considered young. I actually don't feel, I don't know how you're supposed to feel at 75. I'm 75 and I'm like you, Fanny. Some days I feel like I'm 50, some days I feel like I'm 100. So, so it's like, I don't know. I mean, and I think that so much of it has to do with your heart and spirit.
Right. And
Much
actually
more
55.
than how many years you've lived on the planet. I do believe that.
Absolutely.
And so,
you're actually 55, Catherine. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I want all of you to know who think about it is you're actually 55, which means that I'm young. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I think too a lot about the thing that Dominique has said to me as a young person that I have the great pleasure of mentoring, as even though she's on the staff, that she's so amazed that I have vision and creativity and imagination and I'm ready to try new things and let things go. I think that's a part of all of this too, is being able to stay with that. That's the regenerative spirit that comes from knowing that you've got elders upon whose shoulders you're standing and that people are standing on your shoulders too. I think that all of that for me creates an energy, a kind of synergetic, maybe synergy actually, that just kind of keeps things going. So anyway, it's exciting to think about, and it's exciting to think about that life doesn't end, that it just goes, from birth to death to wherever, and that we're all connected and things keep moving along. I mean, there's so much that's wonderful to engage here in thinking about all of this, and that can be energizing for us, particularly in this moment that we find ourselves in the country, when there's such a need for us to focus on what is the pathway to healing, what is the pathway to wellness, what is the pathway to getting off this horse that we got ourselves on. I think that I keep asking, I keep holding up the notion that this era of COVID is an opportunity that's brought us an invitation an invitation to explore, an invitation to go deeper. And I think that going deeper and looking at ancestors, eldership and ancestors and what all this has to do with us is a very important thing for us to do, because in this country, we've let ourselves, and maybe in the world, but I'm just going to stick to the country, we let ourselves get kind of seduced by everything needs to be new and young rather than let's live in an organic way that so you're born and then you get older and then you die and then you're reborn, you know. So maybe COVID is another way to say yes to the invitation that's being offered to us, is to really interrogate some of these ways we've been looking at who we are as people who've lived 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 or 70 or 80 years. What is it to be a human being and to be a person and to have connections, and who are we connected to and why is that important? So, you know, this whole conversation is about, let's see if at the end of it, we can have a little more energy and be a little more close to being who we were put on the earth to be. So we would love now for you to engage with us. And I don't know if you want to add anything else, Dr. Brewster, before we start listening to the audience, or should we move on to audience contributions?
Yeah, let's listen to the audience. Let's have their voices join ours.
So Dominique will help to manage speaking so we don't lose anybody. We've got 3 pages here of people. So it's a little, if it takes a minute for us to see you, then we will, but we'll get to you and we'll get to as many people as we can. So
yes, and there are 3 options. You can type your question in the chat, or if you prefer to speak, you can just put the words "me" in the chat. Just put "me" as many times as you desire to speak, or you can use your blue hand icon on your, you can use your blue hand icon at the bottom of your screen. So either of those 3 options would work. And I see that Ms. Harding, you can unmute yourself and you can go first.
Thank you. It's such a joy to be here and to see my sisters. And Gloria, I'm 80, so I'm right behind you.
Oh my gosh, are you really? Are you really? You're a baby.
Yes. Yes. This is, I wanted to bring in someone who mentored me because she mentored me in so many ways. The loving God had a sense of humor and put her in a Chinese American body. And that's Grace Lee Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs, I first met in the 70s at the Institute of the Black World when we had those table conversations. And Grace was born in 1915 and died in 2015. And Grace was still mentoring and giving all kinds of wisdom until she died. Grace would push you to do things you hadn't done before. She used to say, if you want something done, give it to somebody who doesn't know how to do it. And then you kind of support them, but you force them to learn something new and to teach somebody else. And Grace has several books that I would recommend to people. One of them, Living for Change, her memoir. And then the other one, The Next American Revolution, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. And Grace Lee Boggs was an example in herself, in the community, in helping. There is in Detroit now, the Boggs Center to nurture community leadership. But Grace was a strong person and a sharp-tongued person. She didn't stand for any junk or foolishness. She could quote all kinds of books. She would say, now on page 10, you know, he said so and so and so and so and so. And then you compare that to what so and so said on page 25 and you go, yes, Grace, yes, Grace. So I would like to give thanks for Grace Lee Boggs, who nurtured me and who mentored me and encouraged me. And still, when I'm not doing some of the things that I need to be doing, I hear her voice, but she kept telling me to do the work, get it done, do the work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next question is from Leah, who says, can elders be close to your own age, and can maybe experience place someone in a position of eldership? So in other words, the question is, who can your elders be?
I knew that was going to be a question. And I was happy that that was going to be a question because I wanted there to be an answer that I did not have. I thought, Catherine, you will enjoy this, or you will understand this. I really do think that, and you as well, that Fanny, excuse me, I really do think that I've been teaching so long that I can identify students who were serving as ancestors to me. There was just something about those students. And I do believe you can remove age. When you consider ancestors, yes, I think that's a good question. That's my answer. I have known young people who were my ancestors. I met them actually in Mississippi, in freedom schools. There was some, yes, I did. And now that I think about it, now that I return to that experience, yes.
Dr. Gayles,
Yeah.
I'm just so curious about this. What determinants, if someone's younger than us or whoever, what determinants help you determine that this was your elder or ancestor?
I wasn't sure that they were. I felt that they were, or maybe I needed them. I wanted them to be my ancestors, but I think what not determined that they were, but made me think that they might be, was a quiet sense of knowing. And I used the word quiet there deliberately. A quiet sense of knowing. It was not the sound of the theories and the revolutionaries, but it was just that quiet sense of knowing. It was more a feeling, right? It was a feeling that I had. I don't know that that answers your question. I don't know that I can, but that's what I'm feeling. A quiet sense of knowing, as if they anticipated decisions that I was making, as if they had anticipated those decisions and were prepared in some kind of way to be there after those decisions were made. That's all I can say. It is that it is one of those mysteries in life that we cannot explain with words only. I don't know whether or not, have you had that, Catherine? Have you had that experience?
Yes, but I wanted to ask Fanny, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah,
I think about it in terms of ancestral DNA, that there's this way in which not just because of the biology of ourselves, right, as human beings, but we have something that is archetypal and something that is of the ancestors that gets passed along, right? And sometimes a child is starting to grow up and somebody in the family say, oh, he's just like Uncle Sam, right?
Yeah.
He's just like him. And, there are people in the family who never even got to meet Uncle Sam, but then there are some older people who will say, oh, he's just like Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Look at his face. Look at how he's doing this. Look at how he's doing that. And so I think this archetypal, what I call an archetypal DNA, gets passed along with us. I think it gets passed along with us as individuals, within the family, and also within our cultural groups. I think that happens. So that's how I think of it, thinking of it from that place of the unconscious, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about it in that way of spirituality and something that that was chosen for us before birth, right? Coming from a Yoruba tradition, like that Yoruba tradition of the Ori, of the head, right? Before we're born, like there is the divine that knows who we are, that chooses the path for us. And then we come into the life we're birthed, we can forget ourselves. And then we have individuals who will show up in the lives, who will help remind us who we are and the purpose for being here. And I think that that is a part of the ancestral DNA that happens even through strangers. And we think, who is this person who's guiding me? But they have been sent in a way to help us remember who we are, because I think we need that along the way. That's really important, to have those spirits, that energy coming towards us in an unexpected way, because we don't know who our spiritual teachers are going to be. We don't know if it's going to be a 5-year-old. We don't know if it's going to be a 55-year-old. Like, we really don't. And so I think there has to be an openness of mind, and that you could develop, and patience with yourself as you get older, for figuring out how you're going to be developing into the world, right? And that comes because you're willing to embrace what is unknown and what has to be discovered. And it comes oftentimes through strangers, right? Through strangers. Yeah.
Incredibly
Yeah,
profound.
And I would add that for me, it's the encounters with people that are younger, that I would say have old souls, or they've been here before. That I jokingly will say they've been here before. Sometimes wise way beyond their years, and just having those kinds of encounters that really stop you in your track, and you have to pay attention, because there's something, and it is very hard to articulate what it is. I mean, it's sort of, you have to accept it. It's not even something that I would spend much time trying to talk about to somebody. It's more, this happened, and it's like, in the New Testament, when it talks about Mary hearing that she's giving birth to Jesus, and she holds everything in her heart. She doesn't try to talk about it, because how are you going to explain that to anybody?
Right.
So there's some things that are inexplicable, and you just have to hold it and live with it. And I think that sometimes that's how the mentoring, the supporting, the eldering is happening, and we are the ones who put the lens of age on it.
Yeah.
And the spirit is ageless and not confined to that box. And that's part of the challenge we have, I think, is how do we get out of some of these boxes that we created for ourselves, that then cause us not to be able to have the freedom that was intended for us.
I am certain that a student in CIS Oral History Project and seminar now, I am certain that we have met in some other place. There's that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. I've known this student before, and I pushed that aside and said, no, it's not that I've known her before. She's simply very serious and very organized and very passionate, and that's what it is. That's what it is. But there's more to what I feel coming from the student, or what I feel in my connection to this, from my connection to the student, that she and I have been in the past in the same place. And something I learned from her that she is reminding me of in this class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She doesn't know it. She has no idea. She resists images and poems that I write, or journaling, and that I do about my students. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what about we have other
Yes.
speakers here?
Yes, Lisa Yarbor, you can unmute yourself, please. And then Gloria.
Okay, Dominique, thank you. Dr. Meeks, Dr. Gayles, Dr. Brewster, thank you so much for being here. You don't know how happy my heart is. And I apologize for joining late. Work happens. I just First of all, I wanted to say to Dr. Brewster, I wrote down your quote, a quiet sense of knowing. I'm going to take that with me for the rest of my life. However, what I really wanted to say is, you know, I'm a member of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in New Haven, Connecticut. And I grew up in the church. My grandparents were members of the church. My mom actually she was raised as a deacon out of the church. And people have been telling me, oh, you're just like your mom. You know, you should do this, you should do that. I'm not hearing that calling. However, I have basically become an elder in the church because of necessity. And I would just like to, I would just like to know, how do you deal with being thrust into that position, you know? Whether, and I'm not saying I don't want to be, because I love it. The more I love my church, the more I love what I do, and the more I love what I do, the more I love my church. But, you know, yeah, I'm 61 years old now, and I am probably one of the few women in the world that will admit their age. Yay. But it's just hard to get other folks to be passionate about the work that needs to be done.
So, Lisa, I think
Dr. Meeks, I apologize for interrupting you, but I just wanted to say hello to you again. Valerie Stanley and I were there in Atlanta with you for one of the conversations.
yes, it's good to see you. And I was just going to invite you to let's have an email conversation about your question, because I think it's a little more personal and in-depth than just a kind of general question. And I would be honored to engage in a conversation with you. So my email is cmeeks@episcopalatlanta.org.
I know your email, I do.
All right.
I try to get so many, you know, I try to reach out to parishioners at my church to get them to sign up for tonight.
Well, thank you. But
and they didn't.
I think that might be a better venue for and I would love to be a listening ear. So yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And I apologize if I took anybody's time away.
No, you did not. And you're just fine. No apologies are necessary. But I just think that, you know, the reluctance and struggle and all of that. I think we could talk about that some. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. Gloria, would you like to ask your question? I saw you put it in the comments. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I wanted to say hello, and such a wonderful panel. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. And blessings to you. And if you are of a different background, religion, peace, and universe to you. I wanted to ask the elders particularly, and me being a young 58.
Oh my.
Me being a young 58. My question was about the generation that we're in, the Generation Z, younger, but also older as well. What would you say, elders, about the younger children and teen adults' attitudes of respect today, of manners and empathy? I have raised my 3 children for Dad, Dr. Bailey, and we see a change in the parenting and child connection right now. And as I was doing a curriculum on hate to hope with UNESCO, building and counteracting resilience against hate groups and white supremacy and terrorist groups, there seems to be in the ecosystem from an art education point of view, how do you combat hate and how do you deal with the children? And my question, respect, manners, and empathy. How does the elders teach that at the younger generation as we're going through this peak of hate groups, and then that's being taught at the younger generation of some groups. And it's almost a digress, but how do we then, learning from the past, civil rights, equality, equity, and then going into the future, going forward in the future, how do we deal with that? And what would the elders say about it? You know, I've raised my kids, but what would we do now? I've created a curriculum in art education about inclusion, diversity within the arts, and teaching it to a lesson plan. But what could we do about that? Because that younger generation affects those same people that had that failed attempt on the insurrection of the Capitol, that racial healing divide that we're going through now in our communities. I was seeing people come out of what they really thought. And they were part of cult or Al-Anon and just different types of groups. They didn't say anything. It was quite normal. And then all of a sudden I was seeing it build up to the point of where the Capitol was attacked in our communities. How do we handle that, elders? Even me at 58, I have my wisdom, but those who have lived through it and been through it. And we talked about in my home, Ruby Bridges and the civil rights movement, and even prior to that. How do we deal with this now in the time that we're in, and particularly with our children?
Well,
That's a tough one.
that is a tough one, but we don't make ourselves.
That's true.
Yeah, we don't make ourselves. They didn't make themselves. They didn't teach themselves how to be self-focused and selfish and impatient and the like. They didn't teach them, so they didn't make themselves. They learned that from the culture in which all of us have participated. They learned that. The culture taught them that. It is unbelievable the extent to which this generation, my grandchildren's generation, when they were younger, they are now teenagers. It is incredible the extent to which media gave them, opened the doors to realities and experiences for which they were not ready to have, to see, to understand. I find, I don't know whether or not Catherine feels this way. She is certainly, Catherine, you've certainly had a conversation. I've had a conversation with you about this generation, the impatience, the insistence that things be a certain way. But this generation is driven to be in the spotlight. This generation suffers from depression and, in a way that previous generations didn't. They are driven to be in the spotlight. They must be in the governor's honors. They must be the 4.0. They must do this. They must do. That's some heavy pressure. Yeah, and many of them are depressed. We have created a culture of depression that is. You can speak more to that, and probably off the page, because that is that's not my area. But there's a culture of depression. I see it every day in my relationship with students. They're doing well, but they must do better, because their faces are not on the screen. Their faces are not in Facebook, receiving this honor and that, and so they're depressed.
My siblings, my brother and his wife work in the juvenile system and these probation system in Detroit, and getting ready to retire. And I asked him, I said, how do you deal with this? You see so much every day in a prison, in the system, and how do you deal with juvenile correction and all those things? That's another layer on top of it. And then, learn behavior. Learn behavior. It starts from the younger age all the way through the system. And that learned behavior goes right back out, and then the media and that plays into it, and then it comes back in. And if you don't catch that learned behavior, how do you put it out your mind? This is what they pray about it, they talk about it, they heal about it, and then they have to put out their mind. It's a job. But one thing I says, what is it? How do you get through it? This is your 27th year in the Detroit system, up in Michigan, and I'm in North Carolina. I said, how do you deal with it? He says, this is a job. You constantly have to heal yourself, self-care. And then you have to heal the children. And then you have to continue to heal, the parents, if they care. And so this is what comes into the society. And then it comes to the church, and then we got to go to racial healing. And so that's one thing I said, Dr. Gail, appreciate it, and all of the elders, is that, that learned behavior is really something. And then the lack of caring and empathy, that worries me, because when I was raising my children, I had to teach empathy. Do you feel this? Do you know how that feels? Moral justice, moral conscience, right or wrong. Even when I was attacked by hate groups and retaliation from the controversial books, a couple of them that my husband wrote and I was part of. How do you deal with talking about race and ethnicities and African Americans and Blacks and whites together and coming together? How do you deal with that? And this is why I have to.
So I want to interrupt you for a second and ask Dr. Brewster to speak about the question, because I do think it's a very important question. And I do think that we are incredibly unfair to the young people, because in many ways, I think we have failed them. And I feel that we owe them something, that we have to take some responsibility. Those of us who are older, chronologically older now, I'm talking about. But Dr. Brewster, could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to, for a long time, work with children 0 to 3 years old. And I realized after a while that I could actually look at those children and figure out if they would become or could become surgeons, or if they would become teachers, or to be able to look at them and see what their spirits were like, how they learned, what they were interested in learning, how they treated me, right, as an adult working with them as their teacher. So I could form a connection with them that I felt was a deep connection with these children. And when I would come with bags of toys to play with them, they were so excited. And then sometimes they would cry when I left their house, right? Because it's like nobody maybe was going to play with them until I showed up again, right? I think it's really important that children have models really early on. They have to have someone, even if it's just one person, who really looks at them and says, I see you, because we need to be seen. And I think that because of slavery and because we came out of that oppression, I think as we have accumulated more on a material level, I think that we have bought into an American dream that can somehow deprive us of our spiritual self and our soulfulness. Like in Dr. Gayles talking about wanting to be seen, that thinking about it from a psychological place, right? That desire, that kind of narcissism that says, look at me. I have this, I can do this, I'll do anything to be seen. I'll hurt other people. I'll be whatever I need to be seen. It's like, that's a child who at 3 years old was not able to be seen enough, was seen in an insufficient way. It could have been because the mother was a single parent. I have compassion for single parents. I was a single parent, basically, for more years than I was married, right? Raising my daughter. So I know what that's about. The stress of going to college, working the job, doing all the things that you have to do while you're a single parent. And yet, when we have children, we have to be able to look at them and say, I see you. And if a child does not get that, at a young age, then they will do so many things to get that. They will create all kinds of havoc to be looked at, to be held, to have that empathy with them. So at some point, if we see a mother, maybe a young mother, right, or even an older mother who cannot give that to her child or her children, I think it's the job of the elder to step in and say, you know, I'm looking at how you're raising your children, and I want to give you some advice. And they may not want it, but what I have found is that young people nowadays, they are hungry for advice. Let me go to rites of passage, right? From our ancestral lineage, we come from a group of people that were really dependent and engaged with our rites of passage. Slavery damaged us, right, in a way that we, I think, are still in recovery from. I think we have that intergenerational trauma that can be passed on to our children. So we have to remember that a part of our experience not that long ago was that our families were broken up, right? We created families, extended families, because our children would be sold off, right? We didn't know what was going to be happening to our families. And I think that that's a part of, we talk about epigenetics, right? And how we are passing on from the genes, right? Genetically, situations from before. That has become more of scientific fact. The work, I think, in this 21st century is to be able to acknowledge more and more the way that we have been traumatized as a group, the way trauma has happened in the American psyche due to slavery. And how do we heal that in the one-to-one? I found and felt like my work with those children, those 0 to 3-year-old babies, they were babies, right? Was to love them. I'm hugging them, buying them toys. I'm making their birthdays amazing. It's like, so for those 16 years when I worked with those children, almost 20 years actually, it was really about loving them and letting them be the absolute light that shone for me every time I walked through that door. And a lot of those doors were in the projects. A lot of those mothers didn't have money. A lot of parents were suffering. And to be able to support those mothers, young mothers, and support and love their children, and to help model for those mothers how to hold their children, because I think that's how we have to do it. And going forward, just thinking, saying a little more about this idea of materialism, I think it can grab us. I think it can hold us, and it makes us unhappy, really, because you realize, and I have patients who are high on the economic status, and they come because they feel a deep sadness, like they have everything they could want in this material way, and yet the spirit can be sad. They've gotten everything that everyone said they should have, this American dream. But the American dream itself for people of color has like a twist to it, right? Because the American dream was built on the backs of slaves, right? So we have to look at that and take that into consideration. And when we have the American dream and we go into getting into a materialistic way, right? I think we lose some of our spirituality because it cannot satisfy us. It cannot. It's not enough. It's not enough. And we could have lots of money and lots of fabulous cars and big, beautiful houses, and we could still feel the emptiness of never been sufficiently hugged as a kid. And we have examples in our cultural group of people who achieve so much, right? They achieve so much, but then they use drugs or they wind up not being able to live the life that you would expect because they had risen to such heights. And I won't name those individuals, but I'm sure that we know some of who they are. So I think it starts really young.
Yeah.
It starts really young.
Is it Diop or Joe? How do you say it? Are you a student?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Meeks. Thank you
Hello.
so much for calling me out. My name is Joe Russell.
Joe.
I'm a,
Okay.
yes.
Wow.
Hi, everyone. I come to this call with so much gratitude. Thank you, Dr. Brewster, Dr. Gayles, Dr. Meeks again. And I also want to give a special thanks to Miss Harding. Today's conversation pointed me to so many things. I'm from Detroit, and Miss Harding, she called out an elder's name that was really helpful for my younger sister, who's also an organizer in Detroit. I'm a student, a young scholar in Dr. Gayles' Cis Oral Histories project. And over the course of this semester, it's been really important for me to be in the class because I have not been able to be with my elders. And I feel very close and very connected by you all's stories and voices. It's a part of my healing and being able to sustain myself during COVID and all of the isolation. So I just have lots of gratitude for being here on this call today. Thank you.
Beautiful.
It's great to have you here.
She is extraordinary. She's the definition of a young scholar. She is really an extraordinary. Thank you, Joe, for coming.
And that program is I just think Dr. Gayles there's a special little star that gets put in whatever gets put on her head when she transfers herself to the next realm for doing that program, because you all are just so wonderful. I mean, all of the young women that are engaged in that work, I love being with you. I love the way you engage the women that you work with, and I'm so glad you're a part of that program. It's so wonderful.
And what is wonderful and is a challenge as well is that COVID has altered the way we do our research, Catherine, and it's kind of it has been a challenge, but the young scholars have done well with in spite of the challenge.
Well, I hate to tell you all, but it's almost 8 o'clock.
No.
So, and you know, I know that there's probably other things people had comments to make and would want to make, and we are so, that's always the case every time we have a conversation. We never can get to everybody, but you can feel free to email me if you would like to follow up in some way, and I will be delighted to connect you with anyone that I can, or to be helpful in any way that I can. And I would also want to encourage you all to really reflect deeply about your own journey with your ancestors and with the people that have helped you to get where you are. You know, none of us has gotten where we are because of our own ingenuity. We've gotten where we are because of all of the shoulders we've been standing on. And that's the way it's always been, and it's going to be. Whether people recognize it or not is beside the point. It is a fact that people have helped us and sometimes in ways that we didn't even know. And so can we just all think about how we can be a little braver and stand a little taller and make sure that our shoulders, somebody can reach them so that they can have them to stand on. And I especially want to say to the people who have chronologically lived a few years on this earth, that we owe those folks who haven't lived quite as long, we owe them the best effort we can make to give them some shoulders to stand on. I am so over criticizing people that are in their 0 to 30 because I believe that I have a responsibility to be courageous enough to speak up and stand up and help them see what they may not be able to see. That's part of the job of a crone. You know, you say when you get to be an old lady, you can say stuff, you can get away with it because you're an old lady. Well, it's not about that. It's about you lived a little while and you got some courage and you're not so worried about your ego that you won't say what needs to be said. When Dr. Brewster talked about speaking up to struggling parents, you speak up, but you speak up with the invitation that I will also be with you. I will walk with you. I will support you. I will help you. So let's all recommit ourselves to go deeper about this, to be more intentional about allowing our shoulders to be stood upon. And let's have as much gratitude as we can for everybody upon whose shoulders we have stood. And I just thank you all so much for your presence. And I would invite Fanny and Gloria to have the last 2 words here.
I want to say thank you all for coming tonight, and how much I appreciated being here and being able to talk with you all, and to just echo what Catherine is saying, and also to say that we have to fall in love with everyone. We have to feel that we are capable of that. And that will carry you even in moments when you feel discouraged or you see someone who may be discouraged. Because if you can be in love with yourself and then think, I could be in love with anyone, then I think that it deepens who we are, and it deepens and broadens the shoulders. So I'd like to say that. Thank you.
Gloria?
Yes, I have nothing to add. That's the last word for all of us. The last word. Be in love with yourself. Yeah,
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. It has been. I've been baptized. I'm gonna, yeah, I've been baptized.
And you also sound better.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
I sound better, but I have been baptized in new waters. So
yes. Good night. Good night and blessings, everybody.
Night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So Dr. Gayles, are we going to talk a little bit, the 3 of us?
I think, yeah, that's fine. I think people are still here.
Yes, I can see some people still here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, maybe Dominique will help us. They might have been people that had their
right.
Yeah, they were on. But they didn't know we were leaving. That we were finishing up. You know.
So it was wonderful.
It looked like Dominique also